Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is David Gazai, and I am the Director of Member Services and Learning at Orchestras Canada. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a white male with brown hair, and I have a blurred background. Bonjour à tous et à toutes, et bienvenue à ce webinaire. Je m'appelle David
Hi,
Gazai.
everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is David Gazai, and I'm the Director of Member Services and Learning at Orchestras Canada, and my pronouns are he and him. I am a white male with brown hair, and I have a blurred background.
I would like to start by mentioning that Orchestras Canada is a virtual organization, and we work from wherever we are. I respectfully acknowledge that my home office is in Kingston, Ontario, on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and recognize the enduring presence of the First People. Je voudrais commencer par mentionner qu'Orchestres
I
Canada
would like to mention that Orchestras Canada is a virtual orchestra. I recognize respectfully that my office is in Kingston in Ontario, on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendats, and I recognize the presence of the First Peoples.
You know that this meeting is being recorded and that your participation will be required throughout today's session. There will be a poll to answer in the pop-up window, as well as to answer in the chat, as well as a question to answer in the chat. I will be announcing the poll, so you know when it is time to cast your votes. You will see a pop-up window such as this one appear on your screen to do so. During today's session, our presenter will be switching between English and French, so I recommend you click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and pick your preferred language in order to be able to follow the whole presentation. In order to follow the correct slideshow, you will need to select it from the View option button at the top of your screen that will appear once the webinar starts and not before. Once you click on it, you will see both options for English or French slides. Je tiens à vous informer que cette réunion est
I would like
enregistrée.
to inform you that this meeting is being recorded and that your participation will be required today. There will be a poll to answer in the pop-up window, like this one, as well as a question to answer in the chat. We will be announcing the poll so you know when it's time to cast your vote. You will see a pop-up window appear on your screen to do so. During today's session, our presenter will be switching between English and French, so I recommend you click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and pick your preferred language. In order to follow the correct slideshow, you will need to select it from the View option button at the top of your screen. That will appear once the webinar starts and not before. Once you click on it, you will see both options for English or French slides.
Thank you very much, David. I'm so glad that you've all joined us today. My name is Catherine Carlton. I'm Executive Director of Orchestras Canada, Orchestres Canada, and I join you from my home office here in Peterborough, Nogajiwanong. I am a middle-aged white woman with short, messy silver hair. You can see paintings by local artists in the background, and I am wearing an orange shirt, getting ready for Friday. I live and work on the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe, covered by the Williams Treaties of 1923. 2 days from now, people across the land, now called Canada, will be observing the second annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a day that honors both the survivors of Canada's residential schools, as well as the children who never returned home from them, their families, and their communities. As I prepare for this solemn day, I'm going to learn more about both the residential and the day schools that operated in my land near me to gain better understanding of the harms done and the potential paths forward. David, I'll ask you to put a couple of links in the chat and invite colleagues from across Canada to join me in this opportunity for learning. As we learn more about the past, let us also commit ourselves to a different future, to recommit ourselves to supporting the resurgence of Indigenous music, cultures, languages, traditions, knowledge, and thought. I'll now transition to a few words about today's presentation. The presentation is based on findings from research undertaken by Kelly Hill of Hill Strategies Research commissioned by the Creative Cities Network of Canada. I call this kind of research appreciative. It acknowledges the genuine accomplishments of artists and arts organizations over the 2.5 long years of the pandemic and counting. The research also reminds us innovation is not alien to artists and arts organizations. Instead, innovation is one of our superpowers. The research reflects on what worked and encourages us to build on the remarkable energy and creativity released by the crisis. And it's really inspiring in my view. Finally, I think of Kelly Hill and Hill Strategies research as friends to Canadian orchestras and indisputable leaders in the field of arts research in Canada, with a 20-year track record and nearly 400 research presentations and reports. Welcome, Kelly. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Merci, Catherine. Je vais commencer en français.
Thank you, Catherine. I will begin in French, so please choose your language of choice if you only speak English, but I will start in French for the time being. With screen sharing. My name is Kelly Hill. I am president of Hill Strategies based in Hamilton in Ontario. I am a white man. I am at home today, like almost every day for the past 20 years. And behind me,
Bleu avec,
there's a
de
blue
l'art
wall with local art on it, like Catherine has mentioned. Now today, I will start by speaking of innovation and resilience, specifically in the arts, culture, and heritage sectors in Canada. I would like to thank Orchestras Canada for having organized today's discussion. I would like to tell you that the website for the research project is on culturalresilience.ca. And in addition to the Creative City Network of Canada, which was mentioned by Catherine, there are 3 other partners in the research project: the Council of Human Resources Council, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, and Les Arts et la Ville Network. And of course, I want to thank these people for having found the funding for the research project. Now, innovation and resilience during the pandemic. We all know that when in the context of the pandemic, it was very difficult to continue to have human connection, especially for cultural organizations, especially in the performing arts. So this research project aimed to see what would be innovative practices, interesting stories that became sources of resilience for cultural organizations. As Barbara Baranick said, from the Musée d'Art de Rouyn-Noranda, COVID forced us to think outside the box and think very fast. And that is what we tried to get to. How did this occur? In many organizations, with individual artists, etc. I will start by asking you a quick question, or perhaps it's a big question. In general, do you have a positive or negative attitude towards the word innovation? I know that there's many people who have different opinions concerning innovation, especially right now when we are asked to innovate almost perpetually. So the question today is, in general, do you have a positive or negative attitude towards the word innovation? And I've got here, the answers are very positive, neutral, somewhat negative, or very negative. So if we can open up the vote. You can vote. I will leave you a few seconds to do so.
moi, je suis plus ou moins d'accord avec ça.
I more or less agree with this. I have always found that innovation should be a good thing.
Merci d'avoir participé.
Thank you for participating. It's very interesting how the result is interesting here.
Bonne chose.
So very positive, somewhat positive, 41%, and neutral at 15%. So nobody has said negative.
Bon. Oups. Bon, j'ai perdu l'écran momentairement.
I've lost my screen momentarily. Now, we know that there are many challenges in the arts, heritage, and entertainment sector since the beginning of the pandemic, and even before, of course. But Statistics Canada asked a very interesting question of arts and entertainment organizations to see if organizations were in a better overall position today in 2022 than they were in 2019 before the pandemic, in the same position or in a worse position. And approximately a quarter of the organizations said that they were in a better position now.
À peu près le tiers.
Approximately 1/3 of the organizations said that they're in about the same position as before the pandemic. And another third said that they are in a worse position currently. If we compare this to all other industries, all organizations, Canadian companies, there are more organizations in arts, entertainment, and recreation that are in a worse position now than the Canadian average. And of course, it's a bad thing. It was very difficult in the sector, and this is just more evidence of this fact.
All right, switching to English. These statistics I've just recently compiled. They did not exist a year ago when we started we're deep into the research project on innovation and resilience. But Stats Canada has since done some interesting surveys about innovation. And one of the surveys asked about whether organizations or businesses had introduced some type of innovation since 2020. So since the start of the pandemic, have you introduced some kind of innovation? And about a quarter of all organizations and businesses in all industries, that's the bottom bar, 24%, said that they introduced some kind of innovation, whether it's in processes or products, were the two main categories that people could choose from. You can see that this is just the top half of the bar. So the above average sectors that StatsCan tracks. And you can see that arts, entertainment, and recreation is near the top of all of the sectors in terms of the percentage of organizations and businesses who have innovated in some way, shape, or form since the start of the pandemic. So congratulations to you as art sector's leaders for having done so. Maybe that's why you've got positive impressions and attitudes towards innovation, because you have innovated yourselves, and quite possibly recently. It's also not lost on me that the only sector that had a higher proportion of organizations and businesses reporting some kind of innovation was the one that contains the cultural industries, but also software industries and some other information industries. So the groupings are not perfect, but they do indicate quite a bit of uptake within the cultural industries and arts, entertainment, and recreation sector. And I don't have proof of this because I can't connect the two data sets together directly, but it would be my hope, certainly, and my expectation that the organizations that have introduced innovation are hopefully either in a better position now, or at least remained in about the same position as they were before. I would like to do that correlation, but I haven't been able to do that. That would take much more detailed data than is available. So these stats that I mentioned are very recent. Come from the Statistical Insights in the Arts series that I publish at statsinsights.hillstrategies.com. And that report was called Leaders in Innovation, the Arts, Heritage, and Entertainment, published on September 6th. I've also published a whole host of other reports, basically in a newsletter form every week since June is how this has been going. One of them was on the job vacancy crisis. In fact, the first post in the series was on the job vacancy crisis in the arts with a question mark, which I took away in the analysis because it did show a job vacancy crisis. Considering, do arts, heritage, and entertainment organizations consider themselves better or worse off now than before the pandemic? I showed you some stats from that. I did it, that was a two-parter. I did a Canadian-wide analysis first, and then I followed that up with a provincial analysis. Seems like a long time ago, but that was a month ago. And also, you might be interested in reports that I've done on perceptions of the arts and culture for personal well-being during the pandemic. There were some really interesting stats in that one about who perceives that the arts and culture were actually important for them during the pandemic and who does not. And the last one I'm going to highlight today is a report on artists and content creators called All Signs Point to Precarity, taking from data from a recent survey and looking at the precariousness of artists and content creators. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to subscribe at statsinsights.hillstrategies.com. And if you go to that page, this is a week ago version of the cover page that you would see on the site. So there's a whole host of information. You can see what other people have liked the most, which reports, and the most current report is always right front and center in the middle, and then around the edges are some of the other most recent reports. But today I'm going to talk for the rest of my time about this Innovation and Resilience project, which you can find at culturalresilience.ca. Which actually forwards you to a section of the main hillstrategies.com website. So that there's lots more detail available there about this major research effort. I had an incredible team, pulled together an incredible team of 7 people, including myself, and we collectively researched and wrote 29 stories of innovation during the pandemic in the arts, culture, and heritage. I'm going to shout out each one of my colleagues because they all did a fantastic job. Andrew Singh in Vancouver. All of us are artists or arts workers or both. None of us are business school graduates, so we did not take a business school approach to this. We took a what's going on the ground approach. What could we find out about what's going on through a survey that we conducted as part of the project, and just through our knowledge of our own sector specializations or regional specializations. We found a lot of really interesting stories. So Andrew Singh in Vancouver, Blanche Israel in Halifax, JP Longboat, who was based in Ottawa, originally from Six Nations Reserve, Margaret Lamb in Kitchener, Melanie Fernandez in Toronto, Miriam Benzacourt-Zerand in Montreal, and me, currently based in Hamilton, but I am originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, in case you care. So innovation, what kind of innovations were we talking about? What did we mean by innovations? It might have included doing new things or doing old things in new ways. Some of the innovations involved technologies, others innovated in processes. We were not particularly focused on technology. Certainly there were some technological stories. There were digital festivals that happened. There were digital connections that happened because that was possible. But we also did profiles of organizations that were really rethinking their processes and took the time available to them during the pandemic to go, okay, how do we move forward better in our own organization? So that might have led them to interesting new directions, significant artistic opportunities, the promotion of diverse voices, combating racism. They tried to, as much as possible, limit staff layoffs. And in some cases, they did increase revenue. So there was a business side to all of this, but it was not the predominant side that we were looking at. I really like the balanced selection that my team members came up with. We managed to cover in the 29 stories, all 10 provinces and 2 territories. We covered communities, urban, suburban, rural, regional, Indigenous, many different disciplines, a bunch of different sizes of organizations, individual artists, older organizations, newer organizations, led by Indigenous people, Black people, 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals, official language minorities, led by women, and organizations that specialized in working with people who are deaf, disabled, or live with difference. So we managed to cover all of that in 29 stories, and that was one of the proudest things I'm proudest of about this this project, is that I really do enjoy the selection that we ended up with. We pursued and wrote about 10 stories from the West, from Afros in the City in Calgary to the Yukon Transportation Museum in Whitehorse. We also collected 19 stories from Ontario to the east and to the north, the Alienate Festival in Iqaluit, the Woodland Cultural Center on Six Nations, Kiran Ambwani and Leila Mestari, who are individual artists based in Montreal, but have done work in different parts of the province and across the country, in fact. The Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra in St. John's, we also did a story on them. And I'm going to highlight just some little elements of what they told us. And a few key findings. One of the important key findings is flexibility and adaptability, whether that's of their mindset, their objectives, their resource allocation. We found that that was a through line through many of the stories, and in fact, all of the stories that we looked at. A quick quote here from Sean Brody of the Queer Songbook Orchestra, saying that resilience is about being able to find the opportunity when things don't go as you planned, but then being able to look at it from a different perspective and see what can be made of where you're at. So it's doing your best with the hand that you're dealt, I think, to paraphrase. And so that demonstrates quite a bit of flexibility. Adona Kemka of Afros in the City in Calgary, she made an interesting connection between flexibility of mindset and freedom of expression. And that if you want to understand Black lives, we need freedom in our expression. If you really want to hear our voices, you have to be committed to opening yourself up to accepting truths that are not necessarily fluffy and easy to digest. Another key finding is that all of the innovators that we spoke with overcame multiple challenges along the way. We all know that there were many significant challenges during the pandemic, but the creative work of artists and cultural managers really blew us away in the 29 stories that we were able to pursue in depth. It was really fascinating to read about each one of those. And I edited all 29 of the stories in English and in French, and was really impressed by them all. It was a huge workload last year, but it was also a workload of love in many ways. So some of the examples of challenges, the Alienate Festival in Iqaluit worked with 25 artists and 25 communities across the north to create digital works for the festival. This was new for them. And Victoria Perron, their executive director, said at times it got complex. Some artists that they worked with wanted to quit, but we supported them all the way through. So that was a major challenge for them. They had many major challenges in launching a digital festival in, I believe it was 2021 that they were able to do that, and working with artists from across the north where internet connectivity is not as strong. Veronique Provencher of Tupic Arctic Circus Troupe in Quebec talked about space rental being a puzzle because a lot of spaces had a lot of restrictions. We could not work as a team in the space. We had to find a space that could accommodate us as a bubble with masks, which required quite a bit of reflection. So that was a very practical matter of where can we actually work together. We're a circus troupe. We can't do this separately. So we have to be able to come and work together somehow to be able to continue doing what we do. And so finding space and accommodation was a huge challenge for them that they were able to overcome. Another key finding was really important for many organizations and individuals, for that matter, is that partnerships really helped extend their capacity and their reach. I quote about this from Ado Nakemka again, that partnerships have been really instrumental in our growth. In Calgary, we have a hard time, at least for Black and people of color communities, keeping our artists here. We're trying to build a community where people don't feel like they have to leave to make it or to feel legitimized as artists. So the partnerships have helped Afros in the city do that, and retention of artists, specifically Black artists, artists of color, was really important for them, and is something that they've been able to work towards and achieve to a certain extent, at least, through partnerships. Veronique Provencher again at the Tupic Arctic Circus Troupe had what I thought was a wise counsel to people wanting to start a project to find good partners. That was a key thing for this organization, to ask for help and to be reliable. So really the idea of the partnership being a two-way street. One asks for help from others, and one has to be reliable in helping others. Another key finding was that sometimes you just have to jump, whether or not you know the exact destination. Leila Mastari, a visual artist who works in Montreal and Chicoutimi during the pandemic, at least, noted that you have to take risks instead of saying that it's not possible to do things like we always have. You have to be bold and try things that have never been done before. And that is really the core, I think, of innovation, and the core of doing new things is sometimes you just have to jump and be bold. Along the same lines, Jill Richardson, who runs the Festival of Literary Diversity in Brampton, Ontario, they transitioned to digital festival incredibly quickly in May of 2020. And she noted that at the time that we did it, no one was doing their events. We were the only literary festival that launched with live events virtually. And they not only did it, but they did it, I believe, quite successfully, incredibly quickly, obviously, between March and May of 2020 to still have a festival, but to make it virtual and to make it actually work with the focus on diversity that they have at the organization. Was a really impressive transition for them. Small can be mighty. It's not just the large organizations that have been innovative. It's not just the richest organizations that have been innovative, not just richer individual artists who have been innovative, but it's come across the spectrum. And Kat McCormick from the Eastern Front Theatre in Dartmouth said that small things can have a larger impact in terms of being able to show off the talent and ingenuity of Atlantic Canadian artists. Eastern Front Theatre launched small things, almost literally. They launched digital shorts, I think it might have been called. I might have the title a little bit wrong, but it was short video excerpts that were a minute or 2 minutes. They weren't technically excerpts, they were standalone works that were very short, a minute or 2 minutes in length. And they commissioned quite a range, 30 to 40 Atlantic Canadian artists, I think the number was, to do that. And even though They were digital shorts, and they were small in their very nature. What they produced, it had an outsized impact on the artists that they worked with, and an important impact on the organization as a whole in connecting with those artists that were there around them in Atlantic Canada. Kieran Ambwani is a photographer working in Montreal. She realized a pan-Canadian project using only the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. This was quite incredible to us. And not only was it a pan-Canadian project, but it was the express goal was to help counter anti-Asian racism by profiling Asian artists. And the reason for that is that, as Kieran said, for some artists, racism was a daily reality. There was a woman who told me she avoided going to the grocery store for a month because every time she went, she felt like people were looking at her strangely. So with anti-Asian racism on the rise, particularly during the pandemic, but in general as well, Kieran was able to launch a really interesting project, basically for peanuts. The stability of the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, but certainly not a huge sum of money. The final key finding from our study that I'm going to talk about today is that short-term innovations can lead to longer-term changes. So things that were done during the pandemic can have a lasting impact. One quote here is from Hugh Donnan of the Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra, saying that we have a ton of new subscribers and new connections with seniors' homes by the nature of their outreach during the pandemic, which connected them to some of the better resourced seniors' residences in Newfoundland. There might be tailor-made paid live performances throughout the year, and that happened during the pandemic, but that might happen again as they move along, and that could provide musicians with more paid performance opportunities. So that could turn into a win-win. Or I think I should say it has turned into a win-win. Emma Hendricks from Video Pool in Winnipeg. Video Pool undertook a real inward-looking revision process during the pandemic. They really wanted to look at, as Emma says, what does an artist-run center look like in 50 years? That was our pandemic reflection. Post-pandemic, because of it, we will be better able to support folks who want to come in person and those who want to join online with accessibility and equity in mind. So they took the opportunity during the pandemic when their literal doors were closed to realize how they could open doors better in the future, and try to take the time accorded to them to think about what they could do as an artist-run center and what they might want to have that look like in 50 years. So that is an incredible long-term outlook that they've taken. So to sum up, I'm going to summarize all 12 of the key insights that we found, that we noted in the process. And as I'm going through these, excuse me. As I'm going through these, I would like you to think of, and if you're comfortable, note in the chat, other examples that you might have experienced from arts, culture, heritage organizations who might have done things that would fit within these insights. And if you're willing and able, please feel free to share in the chat what that might have looked like, and possibly what of the key findings it would relate to. So number one, flexibility and adaptability being key, whether that's flexibility in funding and artistic output, through organizational changes, flexibility of staff, of volunteers, all of those added up to potential for innovation. the need to overcome challenges, no doubt, during the pandemic, whether those challenges were digital, organizational, and or financial. Check, 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 all of the above, I think, for a lot of organizations. Partnerships can extend capacity and reach. Many organizations leaned on others for expertise and networks. Sometimes those organizations or businesses came from outside the arts, culture, and heritage. So expanding networks was a theme as well. Other key findings, sometimes just jump, taking a leap, even without having an exact destination. Small can be mighty. We really found that innovation and resilience can happen at any scale. And short-term innovations can lead to longer-term changes beyond the immediate goal of getting artists and organizations through the pandemic. And if anyone wants to share any other examples, I once again encourage you to do so in the chat. And you might also have some examples that relate to the other 6 key insights that I did not talk about profile in detail today. One of which is that equity bolsters resilience and resilience enhances equity. Having an equity lens helped focus many organizations' goals and helped guide their rapid decision-making that was really needed at the beginning of the pandemic. So we found that focus was key to many organizations getting through things. Support being varied but crucial. The funding sources that we found for the organizations, we didn't try to form a model of what the best funding model was or what the typical funding model was. Funding sources were mixed. Some organizations did find new revenue streams, but not all of them. It wasn't just about revenue generation by any means. Many organizations prioritized and connected better with artists during the pandemic, and we found that that was a source of strength for them. And those who focused on artists were able to center their activities and move forward. A few final key findings: that innovation works best when customized, whether it's technology, whether it's processes. It has to fit for the organization. One of my least favorite phrases is best practices, because practices are very context dependent in many ways. So there might be good practices, there might be appropriate practices, but you'll need to figure out what is good and what is appropriate in your context. We wanted to highlight a couple of larger scale things, not just how people did things and what they did during the pandemic, but we really wanted to reiterate how arts, culture, and heritage organizations could be important places of exchange, whether it's about the dialogue, helping to create dialogue within the community about history, stories, issues, challenges that do exist in every community. So the role of arts, culture, and heritage organizations as places of information, knowledge, exchange was very important to us and was clear in the stories that we pursued. Many organizations and individual artists, in the work that they did, they were able to even redefine the arts and heritage and what it means, whether it's the creative process, helping to move art forms forward, doing an innovative form of opera presentation, for example. Many interesting stories about how, many stunning stories to me. My jaw was dropping on a regular basis when I was reading and editing the stories about what actually people were able to achieve during the pandemic. And so, moving forward, we kind of have new elements in the toolbox of arts, heritage, and culture organizations. Again, if you've got any other examples that you'd like to share, please do so in the chat. I would be interested to read those when I have a moment. And Something else that I'd like to post in the chat if you're willing to share, but just a little time to think about what is success or even innovation? What does that look like for you in your work given the current context? We know that different individuals and different organizations are in very different places right now. So what would be a positive innovation for you? You've all taken a pretty positive, in general, taken a pretty positive attitude towards innovation. So what would innovation look like for you in the current context? Moving forward, what would be an innovation that you would certainly welcome in your own work life? I know from my perspective, I'm not totally sure what innovation looks like now, but there were certainly challenges for Hill Strategies research during the pandemic. In 2020, soon after the pandemic hit, we lost our key source of funding for the Statistical Insights on the Arts series and other projects that we did. So we wrapped up a few things, and then by the fall of 2020, those weren't happening anymore. We were able to find new funders for a revised kind of process in 2021 to the early part of 2022. It was called Arts Insights Canada at that point, but that was a one-year pilot project that was not renewed. So at that point, it was a question of, all right, where do we go from here? How do we keep doing what I think we do best and provide statistical insights on the arts? So that led to the innovation of a subscription model. There are free subscriptions available, but there are paid subscriptions, obviously, that are also available that at statsinsights.hillstrategies.com, and that is what sustains that work. So that is an innovation that we are in the process of looking at and evaluating and trying to develop, because we started doing this in June of this year. So it is fairly new as a working model, and it's okay so far, but it's not fantastic in terms of the revenue streams, but the work has been rewarding. So the work is there. I was looking this morning at some new data sets and I thought, wow, I've got information that could take me through the end of the year probably already without any new data sets coming out. And there will be new data sets coming out. So you know, something else to look forward to there. So that's it's been the pandemic has been a continual process of innovation in some ways for us, and that's been a good / bad thing, I think. We're in a good place with a lot of things, but there have been certainly lots of challenges. So in closing, I just want to encourage you to visit culturalresilience.ca, the website for the Innovation and Resilience Project. And I want to thank you for being there today and ask if you have any questions or observations. Again, as David mentioned at the beginning, you could either raise your hand or pose questions in the chat.
All right, so we don't have any questions yet, but we do have a nice comment from Devin. Thank you so much. A nice presentation, Kelly. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
I'm also reading through some of the comments that have been posted there. Some interesting situations. To do funding in certain categories for people who work with non-speaking autistic students. I've heard that in other contexts for other arts and social development kind of organizations. So I'm not surprised by it, but it remains disappointing. Digital being an interesting and different experience for performing artists. Not everybody likes it, agreed. It's not for everyone. And I think when all of us have the opportunity to do some more things in person, which is coming around again now, hopefully people will come out. There was a question about audiences. Are audiences going to return? That is a key question on everybody's mind, I think. And I think the experiences that I've heard of have been mixed so far. Some have been, some events have been well attended, some less so with in-person experiences. Where's digital going? Where are digital performances going to reside in the mix in the future? All really interesting. Yeah, how much will stick for a variety of reasons when there was funding during the pandemic for innovation? What about the what about ongoing funding to bring that into the fold on a regular basis? Because that's, you know, it's not free.
So it's Catherine. I won't bother turning my camera on quite yet, but my question was voted up by a couple of colleagues. We don't quite have the voting up bit, but it's a question to the people who are present around what you innovated on during the pandemic that you are keeping around. And, you know, or what are you continuing to evolve? And I think that's a question to the group as much as anything else. Definitely getting some input on live and hybrid and digital only content. And, you know, just kind of keeping an eye on that. And what did you do during the pandemic that you're sticking with? What are you continuing to noodle away at to get better at? And what are you happy? Maybe this is the final question. What are you really happy that you don't have to do anymore?
We're going to get a few answers from Richard Hornsby, who says keeping a move to paperless, and Jenna Saylor will continue with online mentorship and workshops. Both excellent answers. And then Margaret, we're keeping virtual meetings, digital programs, concert live streams, and our digital inclusion project community engagement, all going post-pandemic, funding permitting. That's awesome.
Okay, I mean, I just think that's a fair question to put because there was, you know, as horrifying as it is to say, we all got time back. You know, the treadmill of producing live concerts, an important treadmill, a beautiful treadmill, but a treadmill nonetheless. All of a sudden, absent that really important piece of work, we had the time and in some cases the resources to be able to investigate a few other things. I think the question of now that live performances are back and we nervously anticipate the return of live audiences who may have discovered an affection for their couch or for other pursuits during the pandemic. You know, it's just a really interesting questions around resource allocation. But I think that the quest for funding is an interesting one. In one version of the promotional material for this webinar, we referenced the fact that the Canada Council had put aside $200 million for innovation projects over the next 5 years. I think at this point it might be 4 years because I think that was announced about a year ago. but I'm wondering, where we're sort of at in that. There's a self-announced, suitably named innovation tranche of cash. Is that something that's inspiring or just annoying? And with that, I think I'll close my mic.
With the positive attitude that people voted for towards innovation at the beginning of this session, then you'd have to think that that's more a good thing than an annoying thing, Catherine.
But I think this is where we come down to definitions of innovation. And Kelly, can I push you ever so slightly on that one? Because I think, there's an entire scholarly literature about definitions of innovation. I have to say the ones I favor most are the ones that really focus on the fact that the thing that you are doing doesn't need to be brand new in the world and never done by anyone. It might just happen to be something that's new to you and that you have adapted to your own circumstances. There can be small innovations. There can be massive transformative ones. It's all okay. Anyway, those are my favorite definitions. How about yours?
100% in agreement. And I think you from just what you talked about that or those definitions, you listed some of the key findings that we had. So I think our definitions that in that sense would be very similar. And I agree with the key point off the top of what you mentioned, that the innovation doesn't have to be brand new to the whole wide world. It's brand new to that organization. So it's an innovative in the context of that organization. It's not necessarily doing something that nobody has ever thought of before. And we were not looking for that level of innovation that somebody had not thought of before. And the stats from Stats Canada, Stats Canada actually took the same definition that you talked about, essentially boiled it down a little bit, but the slightly simplified form, that it was new to you was basically part of their question. It's not necessarily new in the broader context, but it's something that either something that you haven't done before in terms of product or in terms of process. So new to you was key.
Okay, and let me share another nugget. This one I'll credit to Paul Bourne, formerly the executive director of Tamarack Institute in Waterloo, Ontario. Paul fondly refers to an exercise he calls R&D. Guess what? It doesn't stand for research and development. It stands for rip off and duplicate. And so I think this is where information exchange can come in handy in terms of hearing something and saying, how's that actually going to work at our place? And how might we make use of this process in some way, shape, or form? So I see that rip off and duplicate got a few votes from around the room. So I'll just sort of throw that one out there. Okay. Just taking a look back at the chat to see if we had any more input on this, or if we're coming to a comfortable close.
Yeah, well, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was extremely informative, and I'm sure that all of our attendees are taking a lot of information with them. A lot to think about, but definitely eye-opening, I hope, for a lot of people. I will also thank everybody who attended the webinar, and I hope that you all have learned a lot from what Kelly reported. We will now post a link in the chat for a short survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, if you could take a second. This will help us create our future programming in a way that will be most helpful to you. I will share something here quickly. All right. There's also a QR code to the survey here, if that's what you would prefer.
Right, the QR code, an item that had a real pandemic resurgence.
Yes. And here, I just want to have a put a quick word out there for both of our upcoming soon projects. The first one is an anti-racism, anti-oppression webinar series, kind of a workshop style by Angela Connors. Space is limited, so don't wait to register. This is something that will be extremely interesting and is over the span of 3 separate weeks. And for our folks in Quebec, nous avons un rendez-vous des orchestres du Québec le 10 novembre.
We have a rendezvous for Quebec orchestras November 10th. Don't hesitate to sign up. And thank you, Lawrence. So
thank you so much again for coming. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for the OC staff for putting all this great programming together, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Salut tout le monde. Merci
Thanks,
beaucoup.
everybody. Merci
Bonne
beaucoup.
journée.